Welcome to the Gen X Journey podcast. Dive into all things important to Gen Xers, from advice on aging parents, expert interviews, product reviews, and heartfelt conversations. So put down the joystick, grab your Walkman, dust off your old yearbooks, and welcome to the Gen X Journey.
Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Steve with my good friends Noel and Keith. Today, Keith is going to take us through it should be entertaining for all of y'all, because we've seen some things in our lifetime as members of Generation X. But really, these are rules that are in place now because of something that we did, or
most likely
do, whatever it is. Say, for example, if you remember when seatbelts were an option,
there you go.
Generation X.
Yep. I remember whenever they used to. I remember we used to have a car that had the seatbelt that was on like the railing on the seat, like on the window or on the door or whatever.
I remember that.
Like you would sit in and it would like roll.
And it would automatically seatbelt you.
Yeah, it would automatically seatbelt you. And like you didn't have to do it; it would just do it for you.
I remember. I think I hung myself twice on one of those because I wasn't paying attention and I was leaning forward. So. Yeah, so that's so I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to just call this part one, because I really think that this episode is going to lead to some conversations with our community. I really think this is going to bring out a lot of people going, oh man, remember this, and remember this. So I'm going to start off things that are probably in place now because of something a Gen Xer did at part one. Okay. And so let's talk about, like you said, with the seatbelts, Noel. So that's the first thing that actually made this come to mind for an episode. So the first time that seatbelts were ever actually supposed to be in cars wasn't until 1968. And that was just that they required cars to put them in there. Didn't mean we had to use them, but it just meant that, we feel pretty good about having them in there just in case you felt like using them, right? So as of 1980s, according to AAA, only about 10% Americans wore them. Okay, so that's telling you how crazy that is. That was published in March of 23. In the 1980s, only about 10% of Americans wore their seatbelts. It wasn't until 1984 till the first state. And again, now here's something that's interesting: is this is not national laws; it's only state. So the states basically interpret the laws for seatbelts, even to this day. And the first state to require front seat requirements of seatbelts, not the whole car, but just the front seat, was the state of New York. They enacted this in 1984 to go into effect in January 1st of 1985. And so pretty interesting. Now, to this day, 92% of all states use seatbelt laws of some sort. Do you know there's one state that does not require any seatbelt laws? Can you guess what that state would be?
Today?
Today, there is still a state in our country that does not require the use of seatbelts.
Montana?
Close. No, not really close, but it's up in north.
North Dakota?
Idaho?
No, believe it or not. And this one this is interesting to me, because I would think with some of these states being so close together, they would have to kind of follow suit. But the state of New Hampshire, New Hampshire does not require seatbelts for adults, at least for adults. Okay. So in addition to that, New Hampshire, Illinois, and Iowa don't require motorcycle helmets either. So, but the rest of the states require some sort of motorcycle safety for helmet wearing as you're out and about. But New Hampshire, man, you want to just go be a rebel? You want to go be an early 80s Gen Xer? Yeah. Just go up to New Hampshire and just tear it up. You just have yourself a time,
I did not know that.
Yeah,
really.
So that's crazy.
Have you guys seen the video? Did I send y'all the video of the news stories? They were interviewing people that after the seatbelt law went into effect. Have I sent y'all that video?
I don't think so.
If not, I'll find it and send it to y'all. We should post it on.
You should post it.
On
yeah.
Social. It's so funny. I mean, one of the comments, the guy was like, "What do you think about wearing a seatbelt?" And he's like, "Oh man, I think it's ridiculous." And he's like, a man should just be able to get in his truck and drink a beer and drive down the road and do whatever the hell he wants."
I have seen this video.
Whoa, wait a second.
Yeah,
Drinking
that's
a beer.
A whole new That's wild.
How are you going to drink and drive if you don't have a beer?
Yeah, really. He should do whatever he wants to do. I'm like,
he's that same guy that truly thought that putting his hand over to protect his kid was the way to stop
Oh yeah.
From happening, you know? Which all of us have done at one point or another. Even when they have seatbelts, it's a reaction as a parent to throw that arm over there. You know,
It totally is, man.
Keith, I want to add a thought. So, the evolution of seatbelts since we were kids. So I remember, they weren't required. And I don't even know if I remember my parents actually using the seatbelt for years until it became a law. As a matter of fact, I remember my parents sort of seemed a little feeling put out by having to, now they're made to do it. It's not, it was nice to do. But the seatbelts when we were kids, they were made out of all metal.
Oh man, yeah.
and during the summer when you got in, and if your parents made you wear that seatbelt, that thing was like scalding hot.
Surface of the sun temperature.
Yes. Usually, like, they reflected off of you as the sun reflected off of you as you got in the car, so you're blind and trying to handle this hot seatbelt. And now everything's made out of plastic because apparently that's safer than metal.
Oh, sure, of course.
Whatever.
We'll get to that in the playground safety in a second too. Yeah,
I swore it had like a Chevrolet logo in the middle of my hand from the summer months.
Tattooed. It's like the dude from Raiders of the Lost Ark that holds a medallion. You have a Chevy medallion in your hand.
They're stuck in my hand for life. Man.
If there was a map room for Chevy, you could find it. Thank you to those who follow Indiana Jones. That was really nerdy, and I'm proud to have done that.
I got that.
So, but yeah, so even bicycle helmets, the laws weren't adopted until 1987, and I can't tell you how many times I was out there jumping ramps onto asphalt or the driveway. Not a care in the world. Don't care if I fell off or not, and my head's fine. I'm sure there's somebody with a massive head wound, but that was fine. Everything's good. Rub some dirt in it. How many times do we hear rub some dirt in it? That should have been on a myths too. If you rub your dirt on it, you'll be healed, right?
Yeah,
it should have been our myth episode.
Walk it off too is another one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a
Crazy
slight problem there.
I mean, y'all didn't. Did you all have helmets?
No.
Heck no, man. I never.
If you wore a helmet, you got made fun of.
Oh, totally. You were the geek.
Yeah. Gosh, yes.
No question.
What's wrong with you, man? Wearing a helmet. Good grief.
So safety, top of line for Gen Xers. And so let's talk a little bit about not necessarily something that we did as kids, but something that I definitely observed as a kid. And I'm sure that we all did at this point. And this goes back to, you might be a Gen Xer if you remember the no smoking sign turning off on an airplane. So let's talk about some of the smoking laws that are out there, because this is a whole new thing, right? So in 1975, the first state that decided to do an indoor clean act law was this, and ironically, you were talking about Minnesota earlier for not having a seatbelt. Well, they were actually the first ones that enacted a law for clean air indoors for smoking. And so then things kind of evolved in the 80s. They were trying to push an initiative to quit people off of cigarettes, because you think about it. I mean, I remember my dad, he told me that he was in the Korean War and they would hand those things out for free to keep him warm. So it not only was it commonplace, but that was a way that they would be warm, or it was never thought of as being bad. It was never thought of as being bad until the middle 80s. And so in fact, the first time the Surgeon General reported on lung disease and diseases on smoking was 1986. And you think about it, that's not that far ago. It really isn't. I mean, we think it is, but it's really not. So, and with that, hand in hand, in the early mid 80s was when Nicorette gum came out to try to curb smoking. So that was in 1984, 2 years before the Surgeon General said that it was bad. And so that all happened. But I vividly remember going on airlines and seeing plumes of smoke on the airplane. Oh, yeah. And I remember, do you all remember that, like the seat, the arm rails, right? That you would be on. There were ashtrays. Do you remember this? There were ashtrays in the arms of airplanes. And I mean, I remember looking at some of those, and there were like some other person's cigarette butts still in there when I got on the plane. Yeah. Crazy.
Didn't they had like smoking sections, which is the most dumbest. In an airplane, you had a smoking section. I'm like,
later on,
we're in an oxygen-filled enclosed tube. Right. So unless you've got unless you got a window crack back there, that smoke's circulating, dude.
Which I don't advise.
No, it's not a good idea to open a window.
Yeah. 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 And it was funny because there was an evolution of this smoking on flights. So in 1987, they decided to prohibit smoking on flights that were domestic in less than 2 hours. So if you were after longer than 2 hours, smoke away. I mean, that wasn't a problem, right? I mean, we're all just sit there in a plume of smoke for the 6-hour international flight. But hey, if you're going from Lubbock to Dallas, no smoky. You can't do it. You can't do it.
You got to imagine, like, there's some Consumer Reports lab out there that's doing tests and stuff, and they're like, you ride on a flight, smoke. Okay, let's check your lungs. Okay, those are fine.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh! And then do another flight, and like, oh my god, this is horrible. You should never smoke. How long were you on the flight? It was 2 hours. Okay, that's our mark. That doesn't.
Ironically, this was the same kid that they tested this on that did the food in the pool as a child. They brought those same people back for the smoking on the airplane.
Poor Jimmy, man. Jimmy had it hard. Tough life.
And you didn't listen to last episode. That's your own fault, by the way.
Yeah. So, he used Jimmy for playground testing too. He just got annihilated.
That's right. So that was 1987. It came effective 1988. While this was going on, we also remember that we would go into the restaurants and everybody smoked in the restaurants, right? And it wasn't until 1987 that Aspen, Colorado was the first city to declare restaurants smoke-free. And I remember that there was a point too that there was a smoking and a non-smoking section at the restaurants, right? Do you remember that? I remember vividly. So my mom and dad both smoked when I was a kid. It was commonplace, really, and I don't fault them for it. It was just what happened. But I remember vividly going into our favorite Mexican food restaurant in El Paso, and they made the non-smoking section the section that my parents never ate at. Like, this was like our regulars. We were the norm of this restaurant, right? And like, I remember vividly, they made the smoking section the section that they did not ever eat in, and my mom was so mad. Like, I don't want to eat over there, like, I want to eat over here. And I'm like, well, I guess you're going to have to smoke, Mom, for a whole 30 minutes. So anyway, but I remember that. And so even after that, then finally in 1989, they decided and declared that there were no smoking on all airlines. So basically, if you think about it, it took them 2 years to decide that 2 hour plus flights, probably not a good idea either. Right. Yeah. And so crazy. And then finally, some probably the most contested one of all of these laws for the people who like to do it was 1998. California decides to ban smoking in bars. So, right. So you think about the people who would smoke the most, it would probably be people who went to bars, right? At that point. So then they banned that in bars and everything went downhill from there. But anyway, interesting. What do y'all remember? I vividly remember smoking in these restaurants and just, it just being so, it seemed weird when there wasn't at that time.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I was always like, well, how does the smoke not come to our section?
Right.
We never sat in the smoking section. I was like, how does the smoke magically know not to come over here? And it's, and I was like, is there special filters? And there was no special filters. It was just to, have the proper sections be compliant.
I mean, if they would have gone into the future in 2020, they could have seen that a 2-foot long plexiglass would have solved everything. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, too soon.
No, that's awesome. Or they could at least put like the smoking section and the non-smoking section 6 feet apart. And that was
exactly with a mask. I don't know, it'd burn yourself, but yeah.
I remember the smoking section, non-smoking section, and my favorite was always when they put the smoking section closest to the door.
Right. So you had to walk through it.
You had to walk through the smoking section if you didn't want to smoke. So it's like, oh, okay, this is
makes a lot of sense.
Thought this up. I think bowling alleys may be the last holdout. I think now they're mostly smoke free, but it seems like bowling for whatever reason got a pass on the whole, non-smoking thing. It's weird.
You really expect to walk to bowling alley and see this haze.
Oh yeah,
entire alley.
There's a cloud of it.
I sort of loved it.
Yeah,
it was cool. Yeah.
What is it about smoking and handling heavy balls? Why are those two getting?
I should be smoking then. I mean,
connected
right. No kidding. How's the connection there?
Maybe we
you know how funny. I mean, let's go back to my whole. I was sure I jest about 2020 and all that, but like, okay. Let's talk about the bowling alleys for a second, right? Because I remember telling Dawn, I'm like, I cannot believe that there was a time where I would put my finger in the holes of other people's fingers and then just go grab some nachos. Like, there was a time I thought, that's normal. That's perfectly fine.
Yeah. Why are the most normal, like predominant foods that are sold at a bowling alley, finger foods.
Finger foods. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
of all places, gosh, give us something on a
We're
stick.
sharing athletes' feet and finger foods. You know,
dude, really, man. Like, give it like corn dogs. Why would that not be?
Yeah,
like
give us
the
something on a
thing,
stick.
You know?
Sausage on a stick. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything.
We need a fork and a knife to eat, or a spoon, even, like, just. But
yes,
nachos, man. Come on.
No doubt.
So I got to share this. I was doing a little bit of research in the background while Keith was talking, and would you believe that the generation that has the highest percentage of smokers is the millennials?
So,
no way.
Okay,
Really?
I will tell you funny.
44%.
That's interesting. So I'll tell you a really funny story about this. I don't know if I've mentioned this in other episodes before, but very, very weird. So I was, when I was in college, I was one of the student people that ran the orientations at Texas Tech.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember vividly when this was around, I don't know, 93 to 90 or 93 to 98, somewhere around there. Because I did it while I was doing like a job and master's degree and everything. But anyway, but I remember, and this isn't necessarily millennials, but it brings up an interesting point because I remember early on that we would be having all of these activities and people would be down in the lobbies of the dorms and they would be, hanging out, talking, playing on the piano, playing games, doing all this kind of stuff. And I remember and this isn't millennials because they were just being born, but interestingly enough, like the last couple of years, maybe the last year, I vividly remember we were going through, we were done for the day and we were going through the lobby like we usually do, where we have all these kids and hanging out, getting to know each other. And we're like, nobody's in these halls. It was completely empty. And we're like, we're going over to going to Cricket's probably to go get some drinks or something afterwards. I'm pretty sure that's what happened. But anyway, but I remember we're going out to the cars and we open the door to go outside to the parking lot. Every kid is out there smoking. It was crazy. Like somehow there was like a vacuum where we really all saw our parents doing this and we didn't really want to. And it was kind of like after that, there was started to be a gap where I guess it wasn't as big of a deal anymore. So it was very, very strange that was that way. Anyway, I had to share that with the millennial idea.
I wonder if those stats include like vape and stuff too. Because,
yeah, exactly the same thought I had. And if that's the case, then that sort of makes a lot of sense to me. Because Rob and I went shopping the other day to get some groceries, and every single employee that was sitting out front smoking was vaping. And I was like, all right.
It's a whole new transition.
Yeah, I wonder if the number of vape shops is any indicator. Like,
oh man.
There's one every 5 feet. Like
they outnumber dry cleaners these days.
Yeah, well, they replaced the dry cleaners. Now every dry cleaner that's closed is a vape shop now. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's crazy.
It's insane. It's out of control. Interesting. One way to tell if you're a Gen X is if you've ever drank water from a water hose.
Funny that you mentioned that. So let's talk about the influence of lead in our pipes. So lead was also something that was a big deal. Not a big deal when we were growing up. For some reason, like everything now that's around lead, like I don't remember ever wanting to lick my walls, but for some reason lead's a problem. So anyway, so the government banned lead paint in 1978. So you think about that, I was 5-6 years old, but there was still lead paint being put in our houses. So that was, banned for painting in commercial use and residential use. And lead gas, we talk about unleaded. Everything is unleaded nowadays, but we don't seem to remember that at one time, gas was leaded. There was lead gasoline, and that actually was banned for vehicles starting in the model year of 1975. So basically, the government said you can no longer build a vehicle that takes leaded gasoline or has to use leaded gasoline. And lead at the time, the engines in cars, they would do these things called knocking. You'd hear the clock, clock, a lot of the knocking. And the lead-based gasoline was the gasoline that prevented that knocking. And so, ironically, with the birth of the catalytic converters and some of these new engines, leaded gasoline actually would damage those engines. So they were making a good transition to that. Leaded gas, believe it or not, it was 21 years later that they fully banned leaded gas. It wasn't until 1996 that leaded gas was banned altogether. So 21 years after they stopped producing cars. Crazy.
Wow.
That's
Crazy.
awesome.
Yeah. And also there was a bunch of clean lead safety measures that were done in the late 90s. Lead water from that was seeping from pipes, lead in toys, lead in auto batteries, vinyl lunchboxes. I mean, lead is kind of everywhere. And so something that you can't be avoided much, but a lot of these measures of pipes and putting it in toys and things like that. Vinyl lunchboxes had lead in it. So probably all the Star Wars lunchboxes I took with me at school probably had lead in it, So pretty crazy that there was all that. And it really wasn't until the late 90s that even leaded gasoline was banned. So what other, do you remember any other lead based things? I remember the leaded gasoline and the leaded paint, especially. You brought it up. You brought up the leaded gasoline, Noel, when we were talking about this. Great call out.
The leaded gasoline was the only thing that I remember, because I remember seeing that at the pumps, and it's anyway, I thought it was interesting to want to bring up, because if you've ever might even take it for granted or even overlook it, that it says unleaded.
Yeah.
So you would have to conclude that at one point it was leaded. So otherwise, why say unleaded?
It's such a commonplace word that I don't even give thought to it. It's like, that's just the name of it.
It just is what it. Yeah, it's gas.
Yeah, it's what it is. Gas, unleaded. Yeah, that's. I don't know
they
why
used to make cookware that was painted with lead-based paint, and so that's highly discouraged to ever use again. As you listen at home, use it for decoration. Don't cook with it.
That's the ones that they put on the walls, right?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly
on the other side of the lead-based paint.
Which has asbestos in the walls.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just go deep. Everything
all
about
it.
You're
just
doomed.
Get it all. Yep.
Yeah, so crazy. So, but the things that did affect us, and this affected us in a lot of ways, was we played a lot with time on our playgrounds. We were the outdoor generation. We had I'm sorry that I still think everybody else is soft, but we had the coolest playgrounds out there. And it was basically because of us, and this is truly the theme of this episode, is because of us, playground safety laws came into effect. And I truly believe this. And it was interesting when I was researching a lot of this on playground safety, the evolution of the playgrounds from the 1930s, 1940s and forward. If y'all have time, Google the evolution of the children's playground, because it's really fascinating how, even after like the NASA moon landing and all of this, some things that were more out there started taking shape. And that's kind of the ones that we came into. I mean, I can't believe the 3-tiered rocket ships that they had with the slides that were basically sit down from heaven, as tall as they were, all of these things. So in the 1970s, you think about the playgrounds. These were heavily metal items. They had metal chains attached to the swing sets, right? Most of these playgrounds were either on asphalt or concrete. That's what we were going to land on. They didn't have this rubberized mulch playground that we have today. So all of these things were changed in the mid to late 1970s. The 1970s banned things like metal monkey bars, which I lived on. Merry-go-rounds. Did anybody not at least die twice on a merry-go-round in their park? I mean,
my brother got smashed in the face with the when he tried to jump onto a merry-go-round that was moving about 200 miles an hour.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
We had to rush him to the ER and stuff. It's a vivid memory of mine.
Right. I'm sure.
So,
yeah.
Yep.
And I always remember there was the inertia, and there was always that last person that no matter what wouldn't give up until he just finally was about to puke, or she. Yeah. There were some girls that held their own on this playground. Yeah. So I just remember they would just be like, okay, I'm done, I win. Okay, yeah, you win, but we're going to spin you faster before we stop. Yeah.
I was always the kid that would crawl to the middle of the merry-go-round. Oh, yeah. Because I didn't want to be on the perimeter and flung off into obliteration. But the rapid spinning in the middle, it took some recovery time afterwards.
Especially if you look straight up, that would always make you queasy.
Yeah.
Crazy. So other items in addition to merry-go-round, you have to pause for merry-go-rounds. I mean, you got to tip your hat to the West for that one. But steel seesaws. Do you remember the steel seesaws?
Oh yeah, my gosh.
I can't remember how many times I've been hitting the crotch with one of those things going up and me not paying attention.
Oh, dude, totally.
And we talked about this on the rocket ships, but the high-rise slides. Like the total metal surface of the sun slides with like a half an inch rail on each side that was at least 3 stories tall. So there is still one of these in Odessa, Texas that I drive by regularly, and I am still tempted daily to get on that sucker and try it. I really am.
It's still there, the full metal.
Every time I see it, I'm like, that's the 3-story puppy right there. And somebody has said we're keeping that for historical purposes.
Word hasn't reached out to Odessa yet about playground safety.
I almost feel like I should remove this from this podcast in case somebody hears
keeping it real.
Yeah, somebody was keeping it real. So, and it's funny. The parks got rid of them, but my mom lived in these townhouses right before we had to move her here when she was getting elderly. And that playground, they purchased all of the equipment from the park when it got banned. And so that 3-story rocket, I got to take Hayden up, and we got to experience that puppy. It's still there to this day. Love it so much. Love it so much. But anyway, pretty cool. So steel swings we mentioned. So people worried about the chains, the metal chains, pinching your fingers and all that kind of stuff. So all of that kind of got banned in the 70s. In the 70s and 80s, kind of also evolved the hard plastic, the metal that had rounded edges instead of the sharp metal. So all of that is playground safety measures that I truly believe were because of a Gen Xer that came about. So,
had to be.
Yes.
We probably lost several Gen Xers along the way because of
thoughts and prayers
that led to all these or mangled a bunch of them. Poor
absolutely.
Jimmy.
There's no question. And so so like I say, that's the first couple of things that I remembered when I was going down a rabbit hole on things that have massively changed since we were a kid. And like I say, I truly believe when people listen to this episode or watch this episode, I'm going to do some snippets on YouTube of some of these. I believe this is going to open up a whole new conversation. So that's why we're just calling this part 1. I think that there's going to be a lot of feedback of, do you remember this? Do you remember this? Are there any other things on the top of your mind? Just thinking that you can remember, like, I can't believe that happened when we were kids and it doesn't today.
Well, just in the playground, I remember swinging back and forth to the point where I knew that I could hurt myself bad, but I still had to have that thrill of being so high up there in the swing.
Oh yeah.
That I was possibly going to dump out backwards, but I didn't care because I just kept coming back.
I remember that we would swing so much that the feet of the swing set would come off the ground. Boom.
Oh yeah.
A little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Crazy. That's no problem. Yeah, it'll come back down. That's fine. It won't buckle.
We're good. Made 50s. We're good.
Yeah, no doubt. So,
remember when swimming pools? I think swimming pools another area. I think there's been some advancements in safety. Remember, it seemed like every swimming pool back in the day had like a diving board and and a deep end, like to go with it. But these days, like there's like a personal pool, like in the backyard and stuff. It's rare you see one with a diving board, and I think there's insurance considerations, all sorts of stuff like that. Like there must have been some major accidents or something like that. Even most, like our community pool doesn't even have doesn't have a diving board on it.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think about that. And not only the diving boards, but let's talk about the slides for a second. So the slides that I see in some of the pools now are Rubbermaid, or something. They're like rubber, really low, spirally kind of things. I remember they were like basically the same metal slides we're talking about at the playground. And I remember this, and it seems so normal, but I remember we'd get on top of this slide and the water, right? So they would spray water, but it'd be coming out of this little tube that went up the side of the slide, and the tube hole was rusty. And the water was running out of this rusted hole to make us slide down in this thing. So not only slides, but the diving boards and the slides, all that stuff's crazy.
Back in the day, our city pool had like a legit like diving board. You know what I mean? Like launch you 50 feet into the air kind of thing.
The ones that you could crank for more tension or less tension. Oh
yes,
crazy.
No. We had a swimming pool in our backyard growing up, and we would lift the diving board up and put like a foam mat underneath it to give it more bounce. And we did so many things. Like we jumped off the slide into the deep end. I mean, like just not even slide down the slide, but jump off the top of the slide into the deep end.
Oh yeah, we did that too. Head first.
Absolutely, it's the best way.
No question.
I have no idea. I mean, it's amazing. I didn't like die or at least mangle my body. So anyway.
Doubt. Anyway, good little reminiscent of things that were crazy that aren't around these days. So thank you for letting me share that with y'all.
Nice job, Keith. So
that's fun.
So this will end part 1.
That's right.
we'll come back with part 2 of things that Gen X broke. Basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice things we used to have that y'all don't have anymore.
That's right.
The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the Gen X Journey podcast belong solely to the hosts and guests and do not necessarily represent the views or opinions of any entity they are associated with. The information provided is for entertainment and informational purposes only and should not be considered professional advice. Listeners are encouraged to seek the advice of qualified professionals for any specific issues they may face. The creators and contributors of this podcast make no representations as to the accuracy, completeness, or validity of any information, and will not be liable for any errors, omissions, or any losses, injuries, or damages arising from its use.